can tell the world, yes, about this. I can tell the nations, yes, that I'm blessed. I can tell the world, yes, about this. I can tell the nations, yes.
Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Joyful News in the City, the program devoted to positive news created for and submitted by the members and friends of St. Paul's Church. I'm Cristina Cedeño.
And I am Philip Smedley. We are your guest anchors for this second episode of St. Paul's Joyful News program.
In this episode, we'll celebrate our 2021 high school graduates, sharing their fondest memories of growing up at St. Paul's and what's next on the bright horizon. We'll have another installment of Emeritus Moments with retired senior pastor Tom Henry, and we'll get to know our newly elected St. Paul's president, Ben Emmerich, in this episode's Joyful News Q&A. And in 3 segments throughout the episode, our roving reporter, Joe Jaquay, returns to share the latest joyful news, impressive accomplishments, and life milestones happening in our congregation.
So let's get started with some joyful news.
Yes, about this, I can tell the nations, yes, that I'm blessed.
This year, 12 of our wonderful and multi-talented St. Paul's youth graduated from high school.
St. Paul's recently surveyed our graduates to see what memories of St. Paul stood out to them and to learn what's next in their life's journey. Pastor Jeff Carlson and some of the seniors themselves will share what they've learned.
We'll remember always graduation day. One of the great joys we experience at St. Paul's is watching our youth grow up. From birth to baptism, to confirmation, to high school graduation. With all the church school, gym play, overnight lock-ins, youth Sundays, Bible off Broadways, youth choirs, mission trips, acolyting, and confirmation projects that mark their journeys along the way. This year, 12 St. Paul's youth graduated from high school, and we wanted to salute all of them, their achievements, especially after their challenging, pandemic-plagued final year of high school. So St. Paul's recently surveyed the grads to ask about their favorite St. Paul's memories and to see what's next on the horizon. It's a true testament to the faithful commitment of parents and the special nature of St. Paul's when we see the geographic diversity of the high schools that our recent grads attended, with schools spread from Chesterton, Indiana, to LaGrange, to Chicago, to Wilmette and Winnetka. Equally diverse were these teens' top-of-mind associations with St. Paul's. Here's what they think of when they think of our church. It's also heartwarming to hear what our grads' favorite memories of St. Paul's are, from lighting candles to serving other places and cultures to singing fun parody songs in Bible off Broadway.
The highlight for St. Paul's for me was definitely being an acolyte on the Christmas Eve service. I've done it since I was in 4th grade, and I'm going to miss it a lot.
Trevor Hafner said, "The 3 mission trips and the bonding over the activities, working on projects, doing fun things, and learning about those whom we served during these trips."
My favorite memory from St. Paul's is completing my confirmation project presentation. Finishing the presentation and announcing how much money I raised, I felt a great sense of pride and accomplishment. Walking out from the podium in the social hall and just feeling like I did something good was amazing.
Hi there, I'm Greta Schmall. One of my fondest memories that I have from and of St. Paul's is the Christmas Eve candlelight service. It's been my favorite for as long as I can remember since I was a little kid. And when I was old enough to then acolyte in the service, I just loved it even more.
Kyle Nitcham most recalled on the mission trip to Puerto Rico, where we worked hard and had the chance to bond with each other and grow closer at the same time. We had to scrape off so much paint from one house.
A vivid memory that I'm always going to have and I always remember are the mission trips that I went on. I'm never going to forget the people that I went with and the friends that I've made. It was just such a wonderful experience, and it truly did bring me closer to God and helped me to be the person that I am today.
Molly Canfield's favorite memory was the mission trip to New Orleans.
Sitting on a hay bale under the stars on a mission trip to South Dakota.
Emma Braband favorably recalled, "Bible Story Theater was my favorite thing about St. Paul's. As people got older, many kids had to be bribed by their parents to participate, but I loved it every single year and could always hear my grandfather in the audience laughing at the silly plays on words. So what's next for our high school grads? Well, every single one of our graduates who responded to the survey has college in their future, with 2 taking a gap year first, and the others planning to head to school this fall. And what fine St. Paul symbols of goodness and faith they will be, as they will be spread from Montana to Texas to New York and Massachusetts to Georgia and back to nearby Michigan, Ohio, and downtown Chicago. And the focus of their studies also reflects their broad-reaching interests and aspirations. So on behalf of our on-sabbatical youth pastor, Sarah, senior pastor, Matt, and yours truly, and all who made a baptism commitment to love and support you on your faith journey, congratulations to all of our one-of-a-kind St. Paul's graduates. May you sing many songs, know many joys, heal many wounds, and embrace many people in God's name as you continue to live your remarkable lives. We'll remember always graduation day.
Thanks, Jeff, and congratulations to our incredible graduating teens. We will miss you and your contagious energy. Please come back and visit us often.
Now, it's time to share some cross-congregational joyful news. When St. Paul's asked the congregation in our recent survey about what's at the top of their bucket list for post-pandemic world, the number 1 mention was visiting and hugging their family members and friends. Close behind was doing some long-awaited travel to places both near and far. A few just named simpler things previously taken for granted, like eating out at a restaurant or going to a party, concert, or movie. Well, from the sounds of it, our members are doing all of that and more. Our roving reporter, Joe Jaquay, returns to share this episode's first of 3 servings of the many happy happenings across the St. Paul's congregation.
Thanks, Christina. I'm back to share headlines and happenings from the St. Paul's congregation. Little bits of joy as we all emerge from quarantine hibernation and start to practice being around other humans again. First, there was a lot of hugging going on when St. Paul's returned to live worship on June 13th. What a joy to hear the pipe organ, St. Arbuck's Trio, chancel choir, sermons, and scripture live and in person for the first time since March of 2020. All while the sun streamed through the stained glass windows and we delighted in sitting in hard pews instead of comfy family room couches. A special thanks to all of you who also remembered to change out of your pajamas. The Hartnett family joined past church president Karen Johnson on a trip to Punta Mita, Mexico, where they packed their days with swimming, boating, surfing, and of course, good eating and accompanying beverages. In July, Kurt and Terry Hansen returned for their 4th opportunity to be tour docents at the Potawatomi Lighthouse on Rock Island in Door County, Wisconsin. The good news is they got to live in the lighthouse for a week. The bad news is the lighthouse has no electricity, plumbing, or Wi-Fi. But Kurt reported that it does have good beds. Whatever will they do to pass the time? High schooler Ethan Ashley Ferguson is spending his summer as a counselor in leadership training at the YMCA's Tamps Tecumseh in Northwest Indiana, where his mom Jessica was also a camper and counselor just a few very short years ago. Much missed members of the St. Paul's, Iowa Diocese, Ann and Brent Morty Carstensen, held their Tasting Stars benefit virtually last month, the proceeds of which benefit the Silver Lining Foundation that funds breast cancer diagnostics and treatment. Over its 19-year history, Tasting Stars has raised an amazing $700,000 for this wonderful cause. Sarah and Mark Mosley's Windy City Winds again began in-person weekly rehearsals at St. Paul's on June 10th after the long pandemic hiatus. Look for the ensemble on July 29th at an evening concert at Chicago's Buttercup Park. Church building engineer Fernando Diaz doesn't think Chicago's been hot enough this summer, so he's headed to Texas for vacation. I am hearing from my producers that the grid is down again, so Fernando, you're in luck. Good luck with the heat. And Pastor Jeff and I recently returned from a lovely vacation in the Northeast and New England, where we visited my beloved mother for her birthday and also spent time visiting with former interim pastor Bonnie Scott, who sends her love and good wishes to the St. Paul's congregation. Hey girl, hey, we miss you. In part 2, I'll share joyful news of recent awards, honors, and accomplishments of St. Paul's members.
Joe will be back later in the episode with more joyful nuggets. We now turn to our second installment of Emeritus Moments, our regular feature diving into the vault and archives to explore the remarkable history of St. Paul's.
In the vault in St. Paul's office are some treasures. Last time we looked at the old records. This time we're going to look at the communion pieces. We have 3 silver communion pieces that you see every month. There's the chalice, there is the plate that holds the bread, and there is a candlestick. These 3 pieces are used every month in communion, and the oldest of these is the cup, the chalice, which is 1855. Given by the confirmation class of 1855. The plate was given by the confirmation class of 1857. They kept records of all these gifts. There was no record of any gift from 1856, so that confirmation class must have been a group of slackers or something. These pieces have survived. They've survived the Civil War. They've survived civil rights movements, the 20th and 21st centuries. They've survived 2 world wars. They've survived pandemics now, 2 of them, and they've made it through all of this time. This cup reflected the faces of St. Paul's members. In fact, I can see myself in it right now. It's reflected me from the time I had hair till the time I don't have hair. And it's reflected the pastors of all those years of this congregation as they held it up in communion. The plate as well. It's 1857, not quite as old, but it's still very old. And then there's the candlestick, given by the confirmation class of 2004. This candlestick is something we refer to as the Christ candle. It's the first candle lit on Christmas Eve during the service. It's the last light at the end of the Good Friday service. The light shines in the darkness has never put it out. It's also the candle that sits at the middle of the communion table every month, the Christ candle, a remembrance of the light of the world. And one more testament to St. Paul's being able to survive and thrive is this little box of cups. These are communion cups, individual communion cups that were used in the congregation. I don't know how many years, there's no record of that, but they are all silver. They're kind of tarnished now, but these are all that are left. There used to be hundreds of them apparently, but most of them melted into a ball of silver at the time of the 1955 fire, and these are the few that were rescued. This is our last visit to the vault, but next time we will go upstairs to the archives rooms and take a look around those to see all the other records that are here.
Thanks, Pastor Tom, for another interesting look inside St. Paul's vault and history. Now, let's head back to roving reporter Joe Jaquay to hear about how some of our current members are making history of their own.
I'm back to share the latest news of exciting accomplishments, awards, and professional endeavors associated with some of our esteemed St. Paul's members. St. Paul's member and Expand Our Openness architect Larry Kearns recently was awarded a $200,000 grant from the U.S. Department of Energy to further develop his Tracker Sled solar energy generator system, which is designed for farmers to use their land to generate clean energy while renewing the soil through cover crop growth. Congratulations, Larry. We can't wait to Google what I just read. And by the way, when, sir, do you ever sleep? Recent environmental engineering PhD Evan O'Brien received the 2021 State of the Art Civil Engineering Award for his latest co-authored academic paper on the important topic of identifying viral outbreaks through wastewater analysis. True to form, it took Evan 3 weeks to mention anything to his parents about this honor. Bad boy. In the music world, young violinist Sylvia Barton Pine recently won the gold medal in the Young Maestro International Competition, which will give her the opportunity to perform in Carnegie Hall next year. Obviously, Miss Sylvia practiced. Sylvia's mom, Rachel, kept the world entertained during the pandemic through her weekly live-streamed performances in her Family Fridays and 24 and 24 concert series. And raise a glass to aspiring vintner Dan Berghoff, who recently recruited family and friends to plant over 4,000 grapevines at his new vineyard in Southwest Michigan. Looking forward to future St. Paul's member wine tours to sample Dan's vintage creations. Finally, Hope Basil continues to apply her political and organizing savvy in the Deep South, where she is working as the organizing director for the state of Alabama's Democratic Party. Y'all come back now, you hear and see us, little girl, we miss you. What a congregation of diverse achievers we have. I'll be back at the end of the episode to share news about joyful life milestones and transitions from across the St. Paul's congregation.
And speaking of talented leaders, in March, St. Paul's virtually elected a new council president, Ben Emmerich. Since Ben is a relatively new member to St. Paul's, we thought you'd like to get to know him better through this episode's Joyful News Q&A. To start, Ben, could you provide a short bio of yourself for our viewing members?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm Ben. I grew up in a town called McFarland, Wisconsin, right outside of Madison. Went to Madison for college and then moved to San Francisco, where I met my wife, Kaylee. We lived there for 10 years and moved to Chicago in 2017 to be closer to family. We have 3 daughters, Myers, Holland, and baby Wynn. And we started going to St. Paul's in 2018.
What attracted you to become a member of St. Paul's?
We were church shopping, quite honestly, and we were looking around Lincoln Park, which is where we lived at the time. And Kaylee had the good idea and the good fortune to suggest we try out St. Paul's. And from the first day that we walked in, we were greeted by the Moonies and were sucked in by a good sermon. And we've been here ever since.
And what inspired you to say yes to becoming president of our congregation?
I had been on the church council for a year, and when I was first approached by the nominating committee, thankfully I had had exposure to what the officers on the executive committee do. But nonetheless, my first instinct was, quite honestly, to say no, because we had just had our 3rd baby, I'm starting my own business, and just life in general is a lot. However, my wife had a really good insight and perspective that this was a right time for me in many ways, in the sense that as my business was relatively new, I had a lot of flexibility, and also we just feel called as a family to lean into the congregation and assist with the building of the church.
What do you hope to bring to the position of president, especially as a relatively new church member?
Being a new president of the congregation is an opportunity and a challenge. Like, the biggest challenge, quite honestly, is the fact that I don't know everybody. And so I've been leaning into creating a lot of meaningful relationships with people, especially the folks who have a lot of tenure within our congregation. And for me, an opportunity in meeting those new people is to be humble and to learn about their background and how they approach the church and what the church means to them. I think, though, what I bring to this role is kind of a cattle prod for the church to act boldly and to ask questions about assumptions we've made as a congregation or as a leadership team, programs that might need to be adjusted or fixed or pared back or expanded. That impetus to act with boldness and to act in a way that supports our strategic plan. That's what I'm trying to bring as a congregational president.
With a few months of meetings and leadership under your belt, what are your observations so far?
Above all else, I've just been very thankful for the thoughtfulness and the expertise and the professionalism of the staff. Also, like the same level of dedication by the volunteer lay leaders within our congregation. Like it takes a lot on a weekday to put aside 2 to 3 hours to talk about the in the weeds nuance of a finance report. And it's a great relief to me that I can trust Toby and I can trust the finance committee, and I can do that across all of the activities of the church council and all of our different ministries. I am really blown away by the dedication of both the staff and the people that are involved with the council and with the ministries. I think too, the biggest learning for me is that I need to keep the agenda tight, otherwise things roll out of control quickly. So I'm working on being as efficient as I can in each meeting I run. I think it's a huge advantage for our church how much we do within activism and advocacy, especially with our work with community partners like the Lincoln Park Community Services and Refugee One and the Resurrection Project. I think we need to really streamline our efforts and air them more towards action so that we are in the community doing good work, and we're doing it proudly as St. Paul's so that people find us, that we reach more folks and we bring them to the church.
What do you see as St. Paul's biggest opportunities and challenges over the coming months and years?
For me, I think a huge challenge is, this is a good challenge. It is putting the congregation on firm and sound financial footing for the long term. So what that means for me is building in a reliable source of ongoing funds for the church, often through things like estate giving. It also means that we need to really take a hard look, which we're doing as a congregation, on the timing for the second phase of our reopening. We depend on the generosity of the congregation. The congregation is so generous, but we need to really dial in on a strategic pathway for the congregation to have secure funds over the long term. Above all else, we need to continue making decisions that the church has, making decisions in the way the church has made decisions, which is one of consensus, like thoughtful deliberation, but then clear decision making, meaning once the call is made, we act on it. I think the church sometimes takes a little bit of time to get there, but when it does it well. And I think that deliberation is a successful way of making decisions in a congregational style. I think that there are programs, small and sometimes large, that we could really adjust or potentially say no to if they're no longer resonating with the congregation or the community. To be quite honest, I defer to the ministries to make the call on those specific programs. Nothing comes to mind. But as I said, I see us doing a lot more to streamline our work in activism and advocacy to make sure that we are being an active member of the Chicago community and taking part in making positive change.
Is there anything you'd like to add so the congregation and any potential new members, from singles to couples to families with kids, have a full sense of St. Paul's horizons?
So above all else, my wish for the congregation in the next 18 to 24 months is that we see two things. Number one, we see more people finding and really being brought into our church. So a new crop of members that are excited by our vision, that are excited by what our church stands for, what we've done in the past, and what we plan to do in the future. And then the second thing is that all members of St. Paul's get more meaningfully involved. And that could be different things for different people. It could be them leaning in financially. It could be them leaning in with their time. I think it is far past time for each person within our congregation to really lean into the good work of the church and to get involved firsthand. To a family with kids is very similar to what I would say to an individual or people without kids, or a family of any kind of form, which is that St. Paul's is a place where you will be welcomed as you are, where we would make every accommodation. Like literally our building has made physical accommodations for people with differing abilities. We continue to plan to do that with the next phase of our capital campaign. I feel like specifically for parents with kids, and especially for parents with young kids, I would make sure to highlight the fact that there is care for the kids during the service. It's very fun for us to know that like our kids are surrounded by other kids when they're at church, that there's really good programming for them as they get older. And also there's programs like Little Lights and summer camp. And, I think our children's ministry led by Pastor Sarah is a huge asset for this church. And we need to do a better job kind of shouting from the rooftops that this stuff exists. It's a huge asset to bring people in. And quite honestly, for current members, I don't think everybody takes full advantage of it. So that's what I would emphasize to folks considering the church.
Thank you, President Ben, for letting us get to know you better and for sharing your hopes for St. Paul's. And good luck with your efforts on our congregation's behalf.
Now, for a summary of the latest St. Paul's member milestones, here's part 3 of Roving Reporter's Joe Jaquay's Joyful News.
Retirements, engagements, weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, and babies, oh my. There is so much to celebrate across our congregation. Let's review some of the recent milestones shared by our members. After 14 years, Sue Finkel retired from ISMOC on June 30th. At last, she can devote 100% of her time taking fabulous photographs of everything that happens at St. Paul's and also making me more fabulous cookies. Don Schimpf shared that his beloved wife, Renee Bradshaw, got to celebrate her 50th birthday with an actual party that had guests, music, and lots of love. Nice job scheduling that milestone in a vaccinated world, Renee. Tune in tomorrow to hear more about Don's injuries for sharing Renee's age publicly. A bit of bittersweet joy came when St. Paul's recently bid a fond farewell to active members Corey and John Gallimore and their daughter as they moved to North Carolina so John can work at his new position at the University of North Carolina. We will miss you guys, and go Tar Heels. St. Paul's Germany correspondent Denise Beiderschmidt proudly shared that son Thomas graduated from the Dresden International School, while the Fitzgeralds celebrated a double graduation with high schooler Isaiah and 8th grader Ethan. Jim Brandt won't let turning 95 keep him from attending his granddaughter's wedding in Portland, Oregon next March. And St. Paul's sesquicentennial baby, Colin O'Brien, just got engaged as well. Are all my little babies growing up? Finally, new babies also are bringing joy to St. Paul's parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. Spencer DeForest Ward made choir member Christy and her husband Randy proud parents in May. Ron and Andrea Kepke celebrate the June birth of their granddaughter, while the Mosleys traveled to Texas to meet new granddaughter Paige. Also, the church admin and database guru Claire Higgins welcomed a new niece. Jan and Rick Bale attended the June baptism of their new grandson Wesley on Nantucket Island. And Hannah and Caleb Bryant will make Lois and Greg Basil happy grandparents this November, while Emily Berghoff and husband Steve will do the same for Kathy and Paul in August as a belated 40th anniversary gift for the soon-to-be grandparents. Woo! That is a lot of news and information. What a delight to share this joyful news with all of you. That's it for this episode. This is your roving reporter, Joe Jaquay, sending it back to Christina and Phil in the studio.
Joe, you've done it again. and we're amazed at all the joy happening across our congregation. Before we close, Pastor Matt would like to share a heartfelt message with the entire congregation, near and far.
I want to just stop and say thank you for holding fast to St. Paul's during the pandemic and for returning to worship so readily and so joyfully. It's been great to see many of you. I hope to see many more as soon as little kids can get vaccinated. I know we'll start seeing our young families again, and we can't wait. It's not the same without you, that's for sure. We had a church council meeting recently, and I asked the question, what do we need to be doing right now? It's kind of hard to get a sense in any facet of our lives, I think. We're sort of blinking in the sunlight after this hibernation. And person after person on the council simply said how good it felt and feels to be together again. This was affirming in a lot of ways and relieving in other ways. It does feel good. It feels great to be back together again. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who's got a word for so many occasions for such a young man when he wrote, he has a little book called Life Together. And in it, he says these things, which I just love. The physical presence of other Christians is a source of incomparable joy and strength to the believer. And he goes on to say that we need to be with each other because that's how God communicates to us. Therefore, Christians need other Christians again and again. When we become uncertain and discouraged, for by ourselves we can't help ourselves, but with each other, we need each other as a bearer and proclaimer of the divine word. I'm so grateful to you for coming back to church, for sticking with it, for bringing your very best selves and hopes, but also your brokenness when you walk through the doors. I look forward to seeing you soon. God bless you and thank you.
Amen, Matt. And blessings to you, the other pastors, and the entire church staff for keeping our church close as we've been far apart, and for bringing us back together with such joy as the pandemic winds down. And with that, we will wrap our second episode of Joyful News in the City.
We hope you feel a little closer and more up to date on your church and fellow St. Paul members and friends. If you have suggestions for news items to feature on future episodes of Joyful News, please email your ideas to joyfulnews2335@gmail.com. For now, I'm St. Paul's member, Cristina Crucedeño.
And I am Philip Smedley, and this has been Joyful News in the City. Goodbye for now.
I can tell the world, yes, about this. I can tell the nations, yes, that I'm blessed. I can tell